When you're drinking tea and your name gets called out, you suddenly realize that the focus of attention is on you. So tea aside, you go back on to what you want to talk. So let me talk about the legal policy and the regulatory nuances pertaining to generative AI. Because everybody is talking about artificial intelligence, but very few people are really talking about the legal foundations on the basis of which appropriate work needs to be done for promoting this entire ecosystem. First come first, United Nations has now come up with the world's first global artificial intelligence resolution, calling for all member nations to come up with appropriate strategies to go ahead and promote AI as we go about. And it's not only in New York that AI sounds are being heard. Well, AI is also being heard in the Indian Parliament. Well, we have seen a debut as far as the Lok Sabha is concerned with AI, with massive discussions on deepfakes and on voice clonings per se. But this month has been very special, month of March 2024. Why? Because 1st of March, the Government of India comes up with an advisory. 16th of March, the Government of India comes up with yet another new advisory on generative artificial intelligence. So let's realize that India doesn't have a dedicated law on artificial intelligence. We also don't have secondary legislation on AI. So through these advisories for the first time, I realize that work has begun happening on building up this new body of legal jurisprudence known as artificial intelligence law. Clearly, this particular advisories are very clear. Please make sure when you are providing these generative AI platforms or services, there should be no bias, there should be no discrimination, and that you will not interfere in the integrity of the electoral process as we go forward. So a couple of months back, the Italian privacy watchdog had said, sorry, ChatGPT, you are not going to be allowed in my jurisdiction. Why? Because you are actually breaching the law of the land there. So some quick fixes, some changes, and lo and behold, ChatGPT was back in Italy. Well, from Italy, let me take you to India, where now you have an AI robo, AI teacher. So we already have an AI newscaster who's actually reading news in an Odia TV channel. We now have an AI teacher robo who's actually going ahead and teaching using AI, both as an algorithm and as a paradigm. But the fact of the matter is, it's not just about being a toy for adults. It's more about a cogent agent to be used for the purposes of protecting cybersecurity. No wonder OpenAI is working with the US authorities on cybersecurity. But the fact of the matter is, if you are now going to go to fraud GPT, clearly you get new inspirations on how to commit fraud. We all go and watch Netflix. So let's go to a new paradigm called chatflix.xyz. And this Chatflix is giving you the links of all the pirated movies that you may want to watch, download anywhere in the world. So we have a different manifestation of how AI is now being used. But Devin is the world's first software engineer that's writing, that's debugging, and that's deploying code. So it's a different ballgame altogether that we are actually coming up. Now, why is this important? Because I see this in the paradigm of the data economy, where the data is the new oil of the data economy. And the fact remains is that this particular data economy is seeing a phenomenon where we are data objects. We are generating data on a 24/7 basis. So what happens to my generated data generated by me? Obviously, you've got IPR, intellectual property rights. What happens to my prompt command engineered data generated through generative AI? Who has got the rights on this? Let's read the fine print on ChatGPT. And they say as well, it's your prompt command, it's your data. So you can own the IPR. It'll be nice if you can say it's generated by generative AI, but that's about all. But the fact is, when this technology is able to generate audio, video, image, and text on the fly, it's actually now bring forward large number of legal nuances that will have to be appropriately addressed. Why? Look at the figures and they will tell you a wake-up call. that please, sir, we are growing at this phenomenal pace. These figures are telling us that there's going to be a unexpected, unusual growth in generative AI, and it's going to reach these humongous figures in the next few years. And mind you, I find even these figures redundant and useless. Why? The pace with which AI is growing is going to make all of this a pale comparison to the actual ground reality, what we work across. So when I'm looking at ChatGPT generated content, the other day my daughter was preparing a project for her university, and she wanted to use ChatGPT. I said, please don't use it because you'll have tools. Fortunately, she agreed with me because the university now has got a new tool which allows them to find out which and how much of your content is AI generated. And that's automatically deducted. And it's more a kind of a new plagiarism check. So the next time you want to be in the growing army of authors that are now onboarding the Amazon bandwagon, think again. Post ChatGPT, the number of authors who are publishing books on Amazon have grown more than 3 times. But the fact remains is legalities. First and foremost, is generative AI legal? Well, let me put the opposite question. Is there any law which makes it illegal? Well, since there is no law which makes generative AI illegal, I have every reason to believe that it is legal, and I can even go beyond, and I can say forget about it. At the end of the day, when I'm dealing with generative AI, I'm dealing with use of computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, communication devices, as also data and information in the electronic form. So the building blocks are very much in place. Which are these building blocks? Which are getting covered under the cyber legal frameworks. So I can say that my AI is covered under cyber laws, though that's bit too much of a stretch. Why? Because the cyber laws don't talk about it. But while all this is happening, July 2023, OpenAI has now started a new project. It's called the Super Intelligence Alignment Project. The project is saying, give us 4 years, and in these 4 years, we are now going to generate a new kind of a superintelligence that will supersede human intelligence. And therefore, I've argued in this book, Superintelligence and the Law, what legal guardrails and parameters you need to incorporate now at the time when you're developing superintelligence, because 4 years or 5 years down the line, it'll be a bit too late as we go forward. So clearly, the output of generative AI is going to be legal because it's electronic output. The authorship can be argued, can be disputed, but then that's more a question of fact rather than a question of law as we go forward. But beauty is that litigation is not waiting for law to evolve. In fact, litigation is going to help law evolve. That's why the number of cases that have happened in the US pertaining to OpenAI, pertaining to Microsoft, Google, and others who are now being sued left, right, and center by this huge, large number of plaintiffs who are authors of bestsellers who are saying that, look, my bestseller novel or the book was used for training their AI models, and that's violation of my IPR, so please grant me damages. Well, while that's happening, something has come from Japan, which has completely taken the world by surprise. The Japanese authorities have lately now come to the conclusion that when I'm using an AI model to train on a copyrighted work, then I'm doing fair use. It's not violation of somebody's intellectual property rights. So that's now 2 arguments on 2 ends of the spectrum. And clearly, those arguments will have to be appropriately addressed. The issue is, under the normal law, we have normal contracts. But please remember, we are now begun to start entering into contracts with AI. Here's the problem. As a human, I can enter into somebody who's got an ability to contract and therefore is capable of contracting. But does AI have an ability to contract? In fact, is AI legal? That's itself a big question that we have not yet tried to address. Similarly, on generative AI, the problem is I'm generating content, but the fact still remains is that when I'm generating content, is there an implicit contract that's being entered into between me and the algorithm, or an implicit contract between me and the company that's using the platform for providing its services? So clearly, we have these huge problems, and the fundamental problem is something that nobody wants to address. This is a huge room. In the middle of the room is a big elephant. Nobody wants to talk of the elephant. What is this elephant? The legality of AI. Can I grant legal status to AI? Can I say AI is a legal entity? If so, I will have to then stipulate the rights, duties, and responsibilities of AI per se. But is the world ready yet? The answer is a crystal clear no. Look at these patent authorities globally. Almost all countries have taken this scenario or the stand that AI cannot be an inventor. And therefore, we can't grant patent in the name of AI. However, South Africa is a lone voice that's emerging, which is saying no problem. We'll have no issues if we look at AI as an inventor of new, original inventions. So very interesting stuff, how we go forward. Also, when I'm looking at the AI contracts, am I expecting that the company which is providing me AI services will make sure that nothing untoward gets coming out of AI, which could disturb me, which could impact my moral standards, which could violate the law? Well, that's what the government wants you to do. That if you are now using generative AI in India, please make sure that your AI output does not contain bias, does not have discrimination, and also does not tamper with the election integrity of the electoral process. Why? Elections 2024 are going to be phenomenal in terms of the massive impact of the use of deepfakes in the Indian elections. Let's look at what we've learned from the Pakistan elections recently. If there was one factor that was most significant in the Pakistan elections, that was the use of deepfakes as we talk about. And the extensive use of deepfakes in elections 2024 could be a big challenging issue, which I think authorities like the Election Commission of India are beginning to go ahead and deal with it. But then the problem is Indians still don't yet understand that they are not talking to somebody human with human values. They're talking to an algorithm which is agnostic of human emotions. And therefore, large number of Indians have started exposing, sharing, transmitting their personal information to generative AI. With the result, their privacy is beginning to start getting impacted. We are bound to be also seeing some large number of contractual disputes. We have not yet seen that in the Indian context, but I expect that to emerge in the Indian context as we move forward towards identifying. Now, one option is that the government comes up with a new law, and the new law goes ahead and regulates everything. Well, I'm of the firm opinion that AI is such an animal that you cannot leave it on its own. You will have to have a minimal enabling regulatory framework to deal with it. You cannot just allow the replication of the mid-90s of cyberspace coming now in the mid-2020 ones of this century. Why? Because you cannot allow the generative AI or the AI to be the wild, wild west of the world. One thing that I don't want to talk about, but unfortunately is a ground reality, is the emergence of new crimes using AI. In fact, AI crimes is now emerging as a distinctive subcategory under the cybercrime umbrella. Go to the dark web, the deep web, and you realize cybercrime as a service powered by artificial intelligence is now the new paradigm on the block. And rightfully so. Today, cybercriminals don't want to dirty their hands. Why don't getting cybercrime done through an algorithm? Why? Be rest assured, no law enforcement agency will ever be able to track it to you. So those issues have begun to start coming up because we have still not yet been in a good position to deal with AI crimes, whether it's deepfakes, whether it's impersonations. So here is this couple who's lost 15 lakh rupees in the last few months. Why? Because they have a young daughter. The daughter was going to school in a school cab. They left the daughter. They were about to go to the office. They get a call from Mr. X who says they have kidnapped the daughter. And this Mr. X wants 15 lakh rupees in 15 minutes. And if they don't pay, then they say at the 16th minute, they'll execute the girl. They keep on trying. They want to talk to the daughter. They're made to talk to the daughter. The daughter's crying hoarse, asking the father to save her. They try negotiating for 13 minutes to get that money down. They're unsuccessful. At the 14th minute, they decide to pay. 15 lakhs, gone. And then a location is decided to hand over the child back. They're driving to the location. The husband calls up the school principal to warn. School principal says, "Gentlemen, what are you talking? Your daughter has been with us since morning. So here, a couple becomes a victim of AI, voice clone crimes that have begun to start emerging in a big step. But now the propensity of use of generative AI for criminal purposes is going to be phenomenal. Now, much that a lot of safeguards have been put in, but these safeguards are withering away once I start using prompt command engineering to force the algorithm to give me stuff which is basically illegal as we talk forward. Yet another important issue I think that lawmakers need to understand is the relationship between AI and cybersecurity. We should not presume AI to be cyber secure. Why? Because it's ultimately, at best, a computer resource. And today, if I want to hack you or target you, hacking your AI algorithm and the cybersecurity thereof becomes a good option for cyber criminals as we go forward. So I think this is one big area that we'll have to talk about. Unfortunately, globally, countries are still in a no man's land. There's no international one cybersecurity law in place. So different countries have started coming up with national laws on cybersecurity. You could argue that these national laws could be made equally applicable in the context of AI. But there are going to be challenges because these laws have been drafted keeping in mind computer networks and computer systems rather than AI algorithms as we go forward. So very quickly, I'm expecting that as the world goes towards more regulation, it's not going to be one size fit all. There are going to be sector-specific regulations for AI. For example, regulating the cybersecurity of AI in BFSI is going to be different from regulating the cybersecurity of AI in the healthcare sector. So that's going to be an issue. Yet another big issue is this privacy issue, which nobody wants to talk about. How many of you have read the privacy policy of OpenAI? Two hands. Read it clearly, and maybe you'll be very, very circumspect using technology. Why? It says whatever information you're sharing with the company will be using it as part of its training pool to go ahead and train data, effectively making your private data public, therefore stripping you of both your personal privacy and data privacy as we talk forward. And in the Indian context, when we have begun to start relying upon AI, it's a different sign, a different omen of bad things to come. Because now people are going to these OpenAI platforms or these Gen AI platforms and are asking personal questions with personal details. I recently had a case where, and I'll not name the platform, but one of the couples got married, went to Goa for honeymoon, and both of them decided that they will shoot their first night's private moments on their respective devices. They shot it. So the next morning, one of the partners uploads that particular shot video onto a Gen AI platform with the specific questions. Please identify the inaccuracies or the inadequacies of performance last night and give me suggestions. Now, when you're doing things like these, it's a different ballgame altogether that you should not be having any expectation of privacy per se. Also, I think some countries have dedicated law on privacy that could be made applicable to AI, but India does not have a dedicated law on privacy at the time when I talk. Yes, data protection is going to be very crucial for AI, generative AI. Why? I want my data to be protected. So does that mean that the now Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023 could be made applicable to generative AI? The answer is a crystal clear yes. Why? Because whatever be the medium, whatever be the handle, if you're using personal data, then you're going to be governed by this legislation. Why? Because this legislation is going to be providing huge number of now fines. But the problem is, what about collection of data? Is the generative AI giving me warning, a notice that, hey guys, whatever you're going to be inputting in me is going to be used by me for collecting. And that before I collect, please give me your consent that I can collect your personal data, use it, process it in any manner whatsoever. So mind you, most of these Gen AI platforms, barring Kritrim AI, are not India-born platforms. So these would also be required to ensure compliance with data protection laws as we go forward. Can we have legal accountability of AI, generative AI? That's a fundamental question the world is asking. But unfortunately, we don't have dedicated answers. Even the creators of Gen AI platforms are saying, hey guys, this is like a black box. Yes, I create the black box, but I don't know what it's going to come up with. So how can you make me liable? And that's a big disconnect. I think in a country of 140 crore users and growing, you will have to make these Gen AI platforms accountable for what gets thrown out by them. Otherwise, there's nothing that was actually prompting them to provide these services without any guardrails. Look at this. Generative AI is now forcing people to rethink what it means to be authentic. So, not only artificial intelligence has brought in a new summer, it has brought in also a new wave of artificial stupidity, where people are becoming artificially stupid by relying extensively on the intelligence of AI. Well, in this report, they say AI can help auditors detect corporate frauds through smart analysis. Fantastic. They recently had a new program where they said that this new program in the new version was better than the best financial analyst of the world in terms of analyzing particular kinds of financial data as we go forward. Fundamental questions. How do we deal with safety of generative AI? How can we ensure that generative AI platforms are safe, their outputs are going to be saved? So if a chatbot or if an algorithm is using offensive or abusive language, what safeguards do I have? And how do I protect the people at large? So recently we had this particular program where the Prime Minister of India complains that his video of dancing in a garba was viral when he never ever danced. So these are examples of deepfakes, offensive contents that are going to start getting generated. But fundamentally, the beginning point where the maximum growth of AI legal jurisprudence is going to evolve will be dependent on intellectual property rights. Why? Because that's one contentious big-time area that we'll have to deal with. In terms of copyright, in terms of generating new ideas, in terms of generating new trademarks, new banners, and lo and behold, asking AI or generative AI to create a new invention, and then passing off the invention and under the name of a human. How will the courts deal with it? What kind of legal frameworks have to be put up in this regard? And how to cope up with these cyber copyright issues under the copyright laws of the different countries. Because most of these intellectual property laws have been built by humans under the implicit assumption that only humans are going to go ahead and deal with this entire creation of intellectual property. But with this cognitive intelligence creating far more potent intellectual property, the fundamental distinction will be how do we distinguish between intellectual property of humans versus intellectual property of machines as we go forward. Also, we'll have to be cognizant of how we can marry our existing laws. I can't say AI has come, let me throw off my IPR regime. That's not going to be possible. So I'll have to marry it. What customization I will have to make forward in the context of different nations is a big time ticket item that will have to be appropriately addressed, because the chances of generative AI infringing the intellectual property rights of authors, of original creators is going to be phenomenal. And therefore we are going to now see a tsunami of litigations coming, including in the Indian context. Why? Because I don't know the output that generative AI is giving me. Is it plagiarized? Is it original? If I rely upon it as original, pass it off under my name, is it going to impact my reputation, goodwill, standing, repute? That's a fundamental question that people have no clarity on. Yes, there's a disclaimer on almost all generative AI platforms. Hey guys, you're liable to make mistakes. Be careful. Is that enough? I don't think so. Ask how many typical Indian users read that particular disclaimer. The chances are if you have 100 users in India of generative AI, the chances are 97 would not have read that particular disclaimer, because they are in so much of a tearing hurry to go inside the algorithm rather than looking at the legalities as we go forward. But a bigger question, how do I deal with hallucination? I can't wish it away. Hallucination is growing at such phenomenal pace that unless you have legal frameworks to regulate hallucination of generative AI, you are going to be playing with fire all the time. Yes, the GPT-4s of the world are more superior than ChatGPT 3.5, but does that mean that hallucination is over? Sorry, it's not over. The AI waters are now continuing to start getting muddied, dirtied by hallucination. And somewhere down the line, the legal frameworks will have to deal with the entire issue of hallucination and making the platforms responsible for hallucinated content. Two lawyers in America have now been recently fined $5,000. Why? Because they used ChatGPT to create written arguments for a judge, and the written arguments had 6 American cases, and the court found out that all the 6 cases were fake, the parties did not exist, the litigations never happened, the judges did not exist, and the judgments never came across. And consequently, the lawyers were fined $5,000 for their lack of negligence. But who's going to find that particular doctor who's sitting on the outskirts of a small city outside Hardwar, who's using ChatGPT for feeding in the symptoms of the patient and getting the generic names of salts and then prescribing the same? Now that's happening big time in the Indian context. And I think somewhere down the line, the accountability issue will have to come in more quickly, because if I'm a practitioner and I'm using the hallucinated content without appropriate safeguards, it's got exposure for me, for my organization, and of course, it is going to be definitely not very good as far as the further growth of generative AI. So ultimately, the fundamental question, how do I deal with legal liability of generative AI? Can I say I can make the company responsible? Ask all companies and they say, sorry, guys, we have not asked you to use my AI platform. Please don't use it. So if you're getting anything, it's your problem. It's not my problem. I'm not going to be responsible. Most of these generative AI companies are based in America, and they are relying upon Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, where they are saying, hey guys, I'm a network service provider. I, under the American law, cannot be held liable as a pipe provider of what flows inside the pipe. So you can't make me liable. So that's a new paradigm that's happening. Of course, fortunately, in the Indian context, the approach is different, because the Indian approach on legal liability requires them to exercise more due diligence under Section 79 of the Information Technology Act 2000, because at the end of the day, when I'm dealing with this AI provider, he's a network service provider, and he himself becomes an intermediary in this particular regard as we go forward. How about misinformation liability? Can I sue this company? Maybe I can. Can I be successful in getting damages? I'm not so sure. Why? Because the company said, we did not ask you to use the service. You use it on your own risk. So it's as is available basis. You chose to deal with it. You did not read my terms and conditions. I warned you. Don't put your data. You've done it, so suffer. So that's going to be an interesting argument to legally address. But where will this action take place? Where will be the jurisdiction of these AI disputes? Will it be India? Will it be America? Will it be any other jurisdiction? Well, here, fortunately, the Information Technology Act says you may be located anywhere in the world, but if your services are impacting a computer system network located physically in India, then you become liable under the Indian law. That's the Section 75 of the IT Act. I think I have the buzzers asking me to finish. I can just finish by saying we have no magical answers to bias. And the legalities of bias will have to be addressed. We also have no magical answers to dealing with discrimination of AI. We'll have to deal with that. We will also have to deal with consumer protection issues. Why? Because they are going to be crucial. We cannot afford to have this population of 140 crores be guinea pigs on the generative AI laboratory table as we go forward. Ethical and moral issues will also have to find part of the legal fabric of the law as we go forward in the Indian context. Ultimately, everybody wants this technology, but they want it to be more trustworthy, more reliable, more safe, more resilient, and do not want generative AI to be going rogue, because generative AI is going rogue, and therefore, we have one example. On 15th of August 2023, China has become the first nation in the world to come up with a dedicated law on generative AI. Well, this is much more advanced than what the European Union law on artificial intelligence has been passed in the last week or so. So I think in this regard, there's a lot of work to be done. I will just go and say that the fundamental funders need to be focused on. Let's look at these common minimum principles that are responsible for regulation of AI. Let's not live in a world that we can say that we will have no regulation of AI. we will have to deal with these issues because the intersection of AI with metaverse, with IoT, with blockchain, with quantum computing is going to now throw up new ramifications that also must be appropriately addressed as we go. And finally, with the use of metaverse and AI, we are going to see far more new challenges that we have not yet specifically begun. Finally, just be prepared for a 250 crore rupee fine in India if your generative AI platform or offering does not comply with the mandatory provisions of the DPDP Act. We have a Chinese model to look at. We can look at it. We have the European model. The European model may not necessarily apply to India, but could be relevant. We have the model that's also coming from America, which is in the form of a new law as far as New York is concerned. But then what India does on AI will have to be dependent on the peculiar vision of India, the peculiar requirements on the ground realities, and the landscape is evolving. You cannot afford to say, let me post this till 2025. Sorry, you will not even know how the scenario is evolving in 2025. Generative AI is growing at phenomenal leaps and bounds every week. New tools coming in. I think we require more holistic approaches, broad principles to be defined before we go forward. And then for smaller technicalities, maybe we could leave it to secondary legislation as we go forward. We just cannot afford to say, I'm going to close my eyes to the legalities of AI. Because if I do that, there will be problem. At this Artificial Intelligence Law Hub, we've been researching for the last 8 years on how the legalities of AI are evolving. There's need for massive capacity building for everyone, you, me, everyone. And I think we should recognize this fact. This is the platform that I created, cyberlawuniversity.com. 5 years, put in 37 courses, forgot about it. Little did I realize that these courses have been done by 30,500 professionals from 174 countries, speaking 52 national languages, doing all these courses on AI, its regulation, apart from cyber law, cybercrime, and cyber security. All said and done, a fantastic time to be in, and let's look forward. Thanks.